I came by it pretty honestly. My parents weren't particularly interested in the paranormal or anything like that, but I started off, I would say, with Leonard Nimoy and In Search Of when I was a little kid. And by little kid, I mean like a little kid, like in elementary school in the 70s. So I'm dating myself. And I love that show. And just watching that show kind of always instilled in me this idea that there was something more out there, something we couldn't explain. And sometimes people confuse that for a disregard of science or anything like that. Quite to the contrary. I think science does great things. We're doing something now that used to be the purview of, and some of your listeners will know who this is, the purview of Ted Koppel in the 80s. You need a satellite. And now we can do it from our homes or our home studios. And so I'm a big fan of science. But there's still this area of stuff that we can't quite explain. And it's always held a fascination for me. And it went to my adult years, like so many people listening to Art Bell and Coast to Coast AM. It doesn't mean that I believed every single thing I heard on the show, but I was fascinated by it. And how that turned into podcasting for me was in 2005. I'd gone to school to be a broadcaster, to probably more television than radio, actually. And I ended up working on the advertising side. So I was a little frustrated. I'm like, here I am in my 30s. I went to school to be on air, and I'm selling ads, which, by the way, turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And I said, you know what? I heard about this. This is 2005. I've heard about this brand new thing called podcasting. And I guess people are doing it from their houses. So I got myself a $40 headset and plugged it into my not very good Windows computer, probably running like Windows XP or or something at the time, and just started doing shows. And then I thought, oh, what am I going to call it? It's a podcast, and it's about the paranormal. The Paranormal Podcast. So that tells you how early it was I got that name, and got the trademark on it too. And but anyway, the point being that the podcast came from not from a business point of view. It wasn't, oh, I'm going to create a podcast and be able to podcast full time. Really, at that point, there really was nobody podcasting full time. Maybe Dawn and Drew. I don't know. That's a very early podcast. But for the most part, nobody was podcasting full time. You did it for the love of it. And that's why I did, because I was fascinated by these questions. And I got to tell you, the funny thing is, I started in 2005. It was the Paranormal Podcast, the interview show, which I still do, and along with Campfire, which is probably my most popular podcast of spooky stories from listeners. But I thought, man, this will be great. I'll do this for 6 months, and I'll have all the answers. And let's see here. What is that? Looking at the clock on the wall, it's 17 years and almost, and I don't have any answers, really. I have more questions than I ever have. So that's how it happened for me. It was an outgrowth of a genuine interest that I had since I was a kid.